Hello YouTube, how's everyone doing? It's Professional here. So, I got a video today reacting to the Mafia The Old Country official gameplay reveal trailer. This is the game where you play as a Sicilian Mafia in the early 1900s, and it's the first Mafia game that does not take place in America. It actually takes place in Sicily. This is a game I've been looking forward to for a long time, and a lot of people have been, panicking, getting pissed about GTA 6's delay, but I wouldn't worry about that because, we got three, open world games coming out this year. We got, and technically all three of them are crime games. First one we got Mind's Eye coming out next month. We got Mafia The Old Country coming out in August, and we also got Ghost of Yote, which maybe you can make the argument it's not technically a crime game, but there's gonna be bandits and a lot of other criminals, and it's gonna be an open world game in feudal Japan. So I would also call it, a crime open world samurai game. But anyways, let's watch this. Let's react to this. And if you're pissed about GTA 6's delay, don't worry because this is a game you can really look forward to. It's gonna be a good game, and I will tell you, I'm gonna be reacting to it, but then after I react to it, I'm gonna do a breakdown, and I'm gonna tell you guys, my thoughts on a lot of this stuff. I'm also gonna talk a lot about history. I like history a lot, so I'll talk a lot about that. But anyways, let's watch this here.
Come in.
Bravery is not common in this world, Enzo. Loyalty, honor, obedience. They set the man apart from the rest. You took care of Messina, but this matter is not yet resolved. Will you help me bring it to a close?
Of course, Antorisi.
Like they got stealth. Ooh. Okay, so we got cars in the game. People were wondering whether we're gonna be actually able to drive the cars or only horses. The graphics look really good.
You again.
And this game is this game I believe is gonna be $50 instead of $60 like most games are. August 8th. And pre-order, you get the Soldato pack. Oh, so you can so there are gonna be multiple outfits. You can, choose what Enzo dresses up in. But anyways, let me break down a lot of this stuff here, and I'll let you guys know my thoughts on it here. Okay, so this is Enzo entering the boss's office. Don Torrizzi is the new mafia boss here. Yeah, this is him right here. He is Enzo's boss. Now, one thing I will say here, look at these clouds. Look at this here. Go back here for a second, but just watch those clouds. See that? That is lightning right there in the background. So this shows us dynamic weather. So this area that Enzo is in right here, this area is actually not raining. There is not a storm, but over there is a storm. So weather effects really good already. This guy looks to be some kind of monk or possibly priest. He's definitely with the church. Some kind of catacombs that he's in. Okay, maybe I can get a little better angle at this here. Okay, so this right here, this coin is pretty important. This coin right here has the crest of the Kingdom of Italy. So, basically, the Italian flag, it's green, white, and red. And it was the exact same colors back then, during that time, but there is a slight difference though. The Italian flag, the flag of the Kingdom of Italy back then, it had the same colors, but in the middle of the flag, and I'll have a picture of it also on the side of the coin here so you guys can see it, but basically it had, white cross with a red in the middle of the flag, and then also on top you had the crown, the symbol of the monarchy. And in this time period, Italy was a monarchy. Italy was a monarchy up until 1946. Now, people get a little bit confused about this, so I'll just go through the history really quick. How people are wondering, how is Italy a dictatorship and a monarchy at the same time? What happened was, in the 1920s, you had King Emmanuel, who was the king of Italy, and Italy was still destroyed really badly from World War I, even in the 20s. So, and the king had really done not much to fix the infrastructure or raise people's living standards. And, train tracks were blown up, schools were blown up, cities were still destroyed, and people were pissed. And King Emmanuel was basically scared that there was going to be a revolution or a civil war. And at the same time, Benito Mussolini, leader of the Italian Fascist Party, started becoming really popular. He was a soldier that fought in World War I, formed the Italian Fascist Party. He did his famous March on Rome in the 1920s, and he basically told the king, make me, prime minister, or we should say dictator, because when the king made him prime minister, he was essentially dictator, and I will, fix all these problems for you. And, the king made Mussolini dictator, and then, basically the rest what ended up happening with, Mussolini's power and his alliance later with Hitler, and then, the collapse. But basically what happened is Mussolini was removed from power in 1943. And he was removed from power in 1943 by King Emmanuel. King Emmanuel had him arrested. Now, King Emmanuel was a scumbag, the king of Italy. He was an opportunist. And King Emmanuel did not have Mussolini arrested because he realized that Mussolini was a bad guy or anything. The reason that he had Mussolini arrested was because he realized the Axis were going to lose the war. So he was perfectly fine with Mussolini, invading, Greece, invading Albania, invading Ethiopia. He did nothing to stop Mussolini doing that. But when Mussolini was losing the war, when the king was scared that Italy was going to get invaded and he was going to get removed from power, that's why he had Mussolini arrested, basically to save his monarchy. And Mussolini was arrested, but then Nazi paratroopers dropped in and they freed Mussolini from prison. And then Italy basically was fractured into two countries. You had the Italian Social Republic in the north. In the Italian Social Republic, it was the same flag, but instead of the monarchist crest, it had an eagle in the middle of it. And it was basically a fascist puppet state of Nazi Germany. And then, in the south, you had the Kingdom of Italy, and you had the partisans that were on the Allies side. So Italy was divided. But then in 1946, when the fascists were fully defeated, and after the end of the war, in 1946 there was a referendum, and the referendum was if Italy should keep the monarchy or not. Now the majority of the Italian public really hated the monarchy, and they blamed the monarchy for a lot of the problems. They blamed the monarchy for putting Mussolini in power, because remember, the monarchy put Mussolini in power, and he caused so many problems. And what happened was King Emmanuel thought that he was gonna that the referendum would lose really badly if he was the king, and he was right. So what he did was he resigned and he abdicated, and he made his son Umberto the new monarch. Now there's a referendum, and the referendum passed, but the referendum still voted to abolish the monarchy. So in 1946, Italy abolished the monarchy. That's what ended up happening to their monarchy. And Umberto at first did not want to abdicate. He said that the people got the vote wrong, but then in the end, he decided to abdicate and decided to leave. I think he went to Portugal. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he ended up leaving, and Italy went from being a monarchy to a republic. So that was basically Italy from the 1860s until 1946. It was, a kingdom, and then the monarchy was abolished through referendum. So this was the old symbol of Italy. Now, also about this coin, another thing I'll say about this, if you watch how this coin drops, right after this coin drops, you see this police officer turn around. He's looking like, what? This basically confirms that the coins are probably going to be able to be used as like a distraction thing. So like, for example, like in the Hitman games where, you can throw coins and it distracts the, the NPCs. This is pretty much the same thing. You can sneak around the NPCs or actually stealth kill them when they're distracted. Okay, and stealth is a good part of this game too, we're seeing. But what I like about this stealth kill is notice when he stabs him in the throat, he also grabs his mouth right here to prevent him from screaming. It's a more realistic stealth kill. I hate stealth games where it's they just slash them in the back, like the old Call of Duty games. You just slash them in the back, and then that's it. They're dead, and you never they don't scream or anything like that. Throwing knives also going to be a part of this game too. Okay, about this gun here. This gun right here, this gun is the Bodeo 1889. I will have a picture of the revolver up on the screen. Now, I know what some people are thinking. Some people are thinking Battlefield 1. Yeah, it's a lot of people are going to remember it from Battlefield 1, but it was about Battlefield 1. It was probably my favorite revolver also in Battlefield 1, because in most cases, it would two-shot people in most cases. That's what I liked about it. But basically, about the Bodeo 1889, it was an Italian revolver. I don't remember the cartridge exactly, but I do know that it was a double action revolver. And about the revolver, it was a little weird because the revolver did not have a trigger guard, so it didn't have a trigger guard that protected the trigger underneath. It instead had a foldable trigger. So when you would holster, the officers and soldiers would holster the revolver, they would fold the trigger, and then when you need to take the gun out to shoot, you would unfold the trigger. But you can see what that would be bad, because you need every second counts. For shooting too. So, but it would have been better to have a trigger card for the gun. But anyways, that was the design of the gun. The that little thing underneath the barrel, that is the ejection rod. How that basically works is once the rounds are fired, you still have the casings in the revolver. You basically use the ejection rod, you will push all the rounds out, and they'll basically fall out of the revolver, and then a revolver is ready to load again. And double action, what that basically means is that when you pull the trigger on a double action is heavier than a single action, because a double action, it will actually push the hammer back and forward, so it'll fire it. So you don't actually have to push the hammer down like on a single shot revolver yourself. The trigger will do all the work for you. But that's the Bodeo 1889 that we see right here. So here we see that, there's going to be environmental hazards, and, he shot the lantern, and it, caused a fire, and, set the guy on fire. Now, about this part here, this basically, confirms that we will have drivable cars in the game. So about the cars is, we saw cars in the game, but I don't think we actually saw Enzo driving it before. We just saw horses, and people were wondering, are we going to be able to actually drive cars in the game? This pretty much confirms it. But if you look at the type of car that Enzo is driving, I'm not a car guy, so I don't know that much about vehicles. But I will tell you this right here, this is a very, very fancy car for the time period. Whatever, Enzo is driving right here, this is definitely extremely fancy. This is something that very rich people would have. And the thing about this is, Italy was a very, Italy is specifically southern Italy, was extremely poor in this time period, and Sicily was the most poorest out of all of the areas. And in Sicily, in this time period, more than half the people lived in poverty. So more than half of the Sicilians in the early 1900s lived in absolute poverty. And in Sicily, you only really had two classes in Sicily. You had either the really poor or the really rich. You didn't really have a middle class in Sicily. The closest thing that you had to like a middle class in Sicily is you had maybe like a few merchants that would do like a little bit better for themselves. They wouldn't be poor, but you really, really did not have anything like a middle class. And so cars were a luxury. So people really did not have cars back then. Cars did exist in Sicily in this time period, but the people that had cars were the people that had money. They had money and they had power. And so this car, whatever Enzo is driving right here, I can tell this would be a very expensive car. This is something that a rich person would drive. This person he's chasing right here, this is something that also somebody that would have a fairly amount of money would drive, but probably not as expensive. The truck here, the truck is probably not owned by the guy who drives it. Trucks did start existing in this time period, and they started driving them, but trucks typically be owned by the company, and the company would hire a driver and so forth, just like in today's society. So that was basically it. Whoever owned a car in this time period in Sicily had a lot of money. Most Sicilians would get around by horse. That's how a lot of Sicilians got around in that time period. And this also shows you the massive economic inequalities between Italy, and Italy also the Italian provinces. Italy in this time was like three countries, and almost to a degree today it still is. There isn't that much of a divide today in Italy, but basically the reason I say Italy's like three countries is because North Italy, South Italy, and Sicily. North Italy historically is the richest part of Italy, and it's where you had all the aristocrats. So the really wealthy, rich people, they lived in North Italy. The Southern Italy, you had poorer people, a lot of farmers, peasants, and then in Sicily, you had the most poverty. They were even more poor than in southern Ity. And what happened was the northern Italians, they would look down on the southern Italians the Sicilians like they were garbage. They would see them as like nothing. Like the aristocrats were extremely elitist. These were like, people that were born in specific bloodlines. They looked down on the southern Italians like they were garbage, like they were nothing to them. And here's the thing is, even if you were a successful southern Italian, if you were like a successful southern Italian, you were like a businessman, a merchant, you made a lot of money for yourself, and you went up to northern Italy, they would still treat you like garbage. They would still spit at you. They would still look at you like you're nothing because you're from southern Italy. So this caused this massive divide, and most of it was caused by the North. The North were the ones that were the most toxic, and they looked down on the Southerners, and they treated them like trash. And about Sicily, Sicily was even different from southern, Italy, because Sicily historically has been invaded by so many civilizations. It's one of the most invaded places in Europe. Sicily was invaded by the Arabs. It was invaded by the Crusaders. It was invaded by the Spanish, the French, even the Vikings. There are so many civilizations that had invaded Sicily, and because of that, Sicily over time had developed its own unique culture, identity, and Sicilians also have their own language. I don't know how similar it is to Italian. Maybe somebody in the comments can tell me how similar Italian and Sicilian is, but I do know that the majority of Sicilians today understand Italian. So if you speak Italian, you go down to Sicily, most of them will understand exactly what you're saying. But that basically, caused this big divide, between, North and South, and it was mostly an economic divide. It was that the North was rich, the South and Sicily were poor, and they basically looked at them like they were nothing. And here's the thing is, a lot of these mobsters, the mafia guys, they came from really poor, households. And even the bosses, like the Dons, the bosses, they also grew up really poor. A lot of them did. So, and they had this deep, very deep hatred for the, the rich elitists. Yeah, the graphics look amazing. But here's the thing is, remember what I was saying about how this was basically like a huge thing between like rich and poor. Look at this building. I don't know where he is here, if he is like in some rich politician's house, some businessman, or a mafia boss's house. I don't know where Enzo is right here, but I mean, look at this place. Look at how fancy this is. So it was like this in Sicily. You were either really poor or really rich, and most of the people were really poor. I mean, look at this. Cake, fancy wine and champagne. The tableware, everything looks expensive. The flowers all around the wall, and look, the thing is, this house is so expensive that I guarantee you the wall coverings in this house are probably more expensive than some people's homes. You look at these statues and everything up here. So these people, a lot of these people lived in such huge wealth, and they basically looked down on the poor, and the poor like absolutely despised them. So this just giant economic gap. Okay, so about this part, I wanted to say here this. This is a double-barreled shotgun. This is not a Lupara, by the way. Lupara is a sawn-off shotgun. But the Sicilian Mafia, their signature weapon was typically double-barreled shotgun. That is what the Sicilian Mafia used. And the American Italian Mafia, a lot of times their signature weapon, what they used is they used a revolver, typically a 38, and it would be 2 shots to the back of the head. So if somebody was shot 2 times in the back of the head with a revolver, it was typically, the American Italian Mafia that killed them. But the Sicilian Mafia, on the other hand, their signature weapon was a double-barreled shotgun. And the reason that they use a double-barreled shotgun is for 2 reasons. One, double-barreled shotgun, extremely, extremely loud weapon, so it would cause a lot of panic. It would scare people a lot. And the second reason is the brutality of the weapon. The weapon would just... getting shot really close with a double-barreled shotgun, especially with both barrels, would just destroy a body. You would probably be dead before you even hit the ground. So this is... this would just do such damage to bodies. And so people would see that, that horribly destroyed body, the fragments of that body, whatever was left, and they would and everybody would basically know that this was the Sicilian Mafia that did this. It was basically a fear and intimidation tactic. It was to scare people and show people it was the Sicilian Mafia that did this. And the Sicilian Mafia were very different than the American Italian Mafia. Even though the American Italian Mafia can trace their roots to Sicily, they both operated very differently. The American Italian Mafia stopped a lot of high-profile killings. Like, one of the reasons the American Italian Mafia stopped using car bombs is because the amount of attention that car bombs did. It's like, if a car bomb goes off, you have to guarantee that the person that you're trying to kill is going to get into the car. It's also on the top of that, the shrapnel, it's an explosion, and it's going to, civilians could possibly get hurt, and the Mafia doesn't really care about civilians, but the more people that die, the more people that gets hurt, the more police attention gets on them. And so the Italian Mafia was concerned about that. They were concerned about, police attention constantly coming on them, and they were trying to make these kills more discreet. And when you think about it, what gains more media attention? Somebody getting into their car and the car exploding, or somebody getting shot in the back of the head 2 times. The car exploding is going to, get way more media attention. So, but the Sicilian Mafia, on the other hand, were different in that the Sicilian Mafia wanted things to be public. If they were going to kill somebody, oftentimes they would make it public. Today, if the Mafia kills somebody, they try to make it discreet. Oftentimes the person disappears. You never hear from them again. It's like they don't exist anymore. So you don't know what happened to them, but they're dead. But the Sicilian Mafia, on the other hand, they made things really public. And the Sicilian Mafia was really powerful even up until the 1990s. In the 1990s, the Italian police basically went to war with the Sicilian Mafia, and they brought a lot of them down. And the Sicilian Mafia still exists in Sicily, but they're nowhere near as powerful as they used to be back in the day. But if we were to compare the Sicilian Mafia to anybody today, the people we can probably compare them to are the Mexican cartel. These guys were basically a Mexican cartel back then in the early 1900s. That's how powerful they were. They were so powerful, they had politicians on their side, they had police chiefs on their side, they had entire armies of guys. They controlled entire areas of Sicily, just like the cartel controls parts of Mexico. So these guys were just very, very powerful in Sicily. It was very, very hard to get rid of them. And because these guys, a lot of times, these mobsters, these mafia guys, they grew up in really poor environments. They were really, really poor. They grew up with very little to nothing. And so the thing about this is Enzo grew up in a coal mine, or I think it's a coal mine, which they say here. He would be working in horrid conditions. And, you think about this, he gets offered a job, for the mafia, and he thinks, I'm going to be somebody. And this is a lot of poor people were attracted to the mafia because of this, because they could be somebody, they could actually make money through way more money. They're making, probably 5 times more money than they would be working in like the coal mine, for example, working for, the Sicilian Mafia. But a lot of these guys, they grew up in poverty. And one of the reasons the Mafia became so strong also, not just the fear and intimidation, but also because of the fact that these mobsters were from Sicily and they grew up in poor environments. And a lot of these mafia bosses, they would talk to the people and say, I'm on the side of the people, I'm on the side of the peasants, and stuff like that. But the mafia would just use that to manipulate people. They would use that they wouldn't really care about the people, but they would just use that to get the people on their side, because if the people are on their side, no one's going to snitch against them, no one's going to go against them. So that was basically that. But if you crossed them, the Sicilian Mafia, if you did anything, to piss them off, it would just be absolute brutality, fear, intimidation, tactics. It was just horrible. And the thing about the Sicilian Mafia is the Sicilian Mafia were so brutal, they would target an entire family. So, like, they would just, if there was somebody that went against the Sicilian Mafia, they wouldn't just kill them. They would kill, their wife, their kids. They would virtually wipe out the entire family. Like what you saw in The Godfather 2, when, like, Vito's father was, like, killed. And then by the Don, and then what happened was the Vito's mom was begging the Don, please, spare my son, he's young, and the Don said no, and he was gonna kill her and kill the child. That is very realistic for the Sicilian Mafia, as the Sicilian Mafia would pretty much wipe out the entire family. And the American Italian Mafia, sometimes they would target family members, sure, but it was not as prevalent as with the Sicilians. Like the American Italian Mafia, I would say they had more self-control over themselves. Like they wouldn't. I'm not defending the American Italian Mafia. I know they're scumbags too, but I'm saying is that they would not go to a lot of these extremes that the Sicilian Mafia did. The Sicilian Mafia, when they went after judges in Italy, and this was even in the 1990s, and they didn't just go after the judges, they went after the judges' entire families, kids, women, they did not care. They would just wipe everybody out. These guys had no mercy. They were completely brutal. And how these guys justified their violence is they would say, we're doing this for the family. We're all a family. We're a brotherhood. We're a family. And everybody who's not with the family, you're against the family, and you're an enemy. That's basically how they justified their horrible violence. But these guys are so cold-blooded. These guys are stone cold-blooded killers. Really, really, really bad guys. So again, what I was saying is in this time period, most people would be riding horses. That's what they would be using, is horses would be the prevalent form of transportation. But it was you would see the cars and the horses, so it would be weird seeing them together. But yes, it's what people would use is primarily horses. In this part, it looks to me like Enzo is dual wielding, but I think he's only firing one because, we see him firing here again with one hand. Okay, now about this part here. This is kind of important here. Okay, this I believe is a stiletto knife. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, stiletto knives. I know some people are thinking like the operator from Call of Duty, because in Modern Warfare there was an Italian operator and she was called Stiletto, but the reason she was called Stiletto was a reference to the knife. But about stilettos is stilettos. These actually existed from the Renaissance, all the way from the Renaissance. So these weapons are like over 600 years old. And basically, what happened with the stilettos is stilettos were a dagger originally. They were a dagger used by different Italian city-state troops, because back then Italy was not a unified country; it was different city-states. And it wasn't until like the 1800s and like the mid 1800s that people took the blade from the stiletto dagger and they actually put it into a switchblade, and they created this device where the knife would open up. And the reason it became so popular with criminals is because, think about it, is that you could close that knife, shut it off, put it in your pocket, and then you're easily concealable, and you just take it out, flip it, and then that's it. You got the knife, and it's a very deadly knife. It's a very sharp knife. You could just kill somebody just one gut like that. So that's why it became so popular with criminals, is because it's just how fast you could hide it, and just how easily it was to to take out and to use. This does show us right here there is going to be a lot of melee combat focused in this game, a lot of it. Probably a lot of boss battles too. Mafia The Old Country. Yeah, and this is and this game is gonna be, like I said, $50, I think, versus $50 versus 60 for most. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But also, there's a developer diary on this game. Let's react to the developer diary. Let's watch that now. Okay, so this is the developer diary. Let's watch this here.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick Baines, president of Hangar 13. We hope you enjoyed this new look at gameplay in Mafia The Old Country. We're just 3 short months away now from getting this game in your hands, and we can't wait. Mafia The Old Country is an origin story for the Mafia universe, and as such, is both a step forward and a return to the fundamentals of the franchise.
Also, this terrain is pretty accurate for Sicily. Sicily does have mountains and has a lot of hills. There are a lot of hills in Sicily.
The heart of Mafia has always been deep, immersive storytelling, and Mafia The Old Country is no exception. It's a premium experience in the vein of early Mafia games, with
Okay, I noticed one thing right here, in this one
It's
here.
a premium experience.
This gun, you see this gun right here? This gun that this sniper has, this is actually a Carcano 1891. And the Carcano 1891, this was the standard issue rifle of Italy from the 1890s all the way up until the end of World War II. It was a bolt-action rifle. It has 6 shots. I actually own a Carcano rifle. It's one of my favorite rifles. But I own the M41 version. The M41 version is the World War II version, and it's the long rifle version. The Carcanos that you typically see in video games are the Carbine version. You almost never see the long rifle version, because the Italians actually mass-produced carbines. They made a lot of Carcano carbines. But about the Carcano is not the most famous as being the standard issue rifle of Italy through World War I and World War II. It's the most famous for being the rifle that killed JFK. Lee Harvey Oswald, he actually ordered in the magazine an M38, an updated version of the Carcano in a magazine, and he used that in order to shoot Kennedy. And there's a lot of debates on if he was able to make that shot with the Carcano, because the Carcano does suffer from some accuracy problems at longer ranges and because of its ammunition. But technically, I would say it's possible with that shot, but it was there's a lot of things with the JFK assassination that's a little weird with the Carcano, but that'll be probably a video for another day. I talk more about that in my Black Ops playthrough, but basically that's it. It's the Carcano rifle right here that you see.
In the vein of early Mafia games, with a linear narrative set against a stunning, authentic backdrop.
Yeah, so you see, it looks, the world looks beautiful, but people lived in poverty. And you see this house right here, this is like a one-room house. And about this is an entire family would live here. The husband and the wife and the kids, they would all live here. Nobody would have their own room. They would have the kitchen, the bathroom, everything all in just one house. There was such poverty in Sicily. It was like more than half of the people lived in poverty. And here's the thing, I think it was like 40% of Sicilians actually could not read in this time period. So you even had like rich mafia bosses, like people who were like multi-millionaires, and they could not read.
Of 1900 Sicily. That focus has allowed us to deliver a classic organised crime drama in the period authentic Mafia rules and traditions of the era. And as you just saw, we've made some exciting gameplay updates. Whether you're using a knife or a gun, using stealth or in a shootout, this is brutal and grounded in all the best ways. It's all going to pull you in from every angle, pushing the franchise forward in a location and time painstakingly created with the utmost authenticity and detail using Unreal Engine 5. Stick around, because next up is our development team, who have loads of awesome behind-the-scenes insights on how we brought this title to life. And stay tuned between now and August, as we'll have even more to tell and show. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Come in.
Our top goal for every Mafia game is to deliver the promise to a player that you're going to play a classic mob movie. Mafia The Old Country is a linear crime drama set against a beautiful Sicilian backdrop. The first step for us was to make sure that we were nailing all of the things that players expect from a Mafia game. The quality of its storytelling, how immersive it is, how authentic it is. Previous Mafia games have been set in big American cities. We've taken the action and we've put our story in rural Sicily, in the place where the Mafia began.
You really feel like you're transported
That is true. That's where the Italian Mafia is from. It is from Sicily.
into another time. It feels really
About this here, this we see some kind of Roman Catholic event here. I will say about this is that Sicily is a very, very religious place. Like people in Sicily are extremely religious. It is one of the most religious places in Europe to this day. It is mostly Catholic, so very realistic having this tier too.
unique and different, but yet really familiar. Players are really going to enjoy that aspect of it.
Our entry point for making these crime dramas is always the protagonist. We wanted to make sure that our main character, Enzo Favara, lives up to the standard which we've set in the past, and I hope in some ways even exceeds that.
All of the men in this room are bound by blood.
Enzo grows up in a sulfur mine. He's one of a bunch of children that are sold to the mine owners at this point in history in Sicily. Their life expectancy is short, and they're essentially seen as disposable.
Enzo
Okay, so what he's saying is true here. So he grows up in a sulfur mine, so it was not a coal mine, it was a sulfur mine. But about this is how was Enzo like a forced worker here? How this basically happened is he was probably sold into indentured servitude. Now, indentured servitude, this existed all over the world, so everywhere, Europe, North America, Africa, Asia, South America, and indentured servitude in most cases, in most places, it's basically just another word for slavery. That's what indentured servitude is. It's that the person is not allowed to leave, they are forced to work for the person. The only difference is that in indentured servitude, sometimes there is a contract, and the contract sometimes says that the person is supposed to work for this amount of time, and then after that time, they are freed, whereas somebody who's enslaved is basically enslaved in most cases forever. They never are free. But basically, this is forced labor. This is a form of slavery, and the reason that a lot of countries were able to get away with this stuff, even though slavery is outlawed in a lot of countries, the reason that countries are still able to get away with doing stuff like this is because what would happen is it would oftentimes be like a family was in debt, like they were in debt to somebody, like they borrowed a lot of money or something like that from like a company, and they needed to pay the money back. And what would happen is, like, the father would just basically sign off like a contract and say, my son is going to work in your coal mines for like the next 10 years with no pay, and that would be like a way to pay off the debt or something like that. And stuff like that happened. It happened in so many countries, and like the child had no choice. They were forced to work, and it was just horrible, grueling. And also, you would think the kids would despise their parents for doing something like that to them. But people did stuff like this. They would sell out their kids to basically pay off their debt. So I don't know how Enzo ends up in this sulfur mine, but I can imagine it would be something like this. Like his own family betrayed him, or sold him out into indentured servitude. But this was a really, really horrible thing being put in indentured servitude. Absolutely horrible. I would not wish this on anyone. And the Italian government did absolutely nothing to stop this. Like the monarchy in Italy did nothing to really stop stuff like this. But look at what they're working with. And also at the same time too is this in this time period, they don't have the same safety equipment that we have, like in these mines. So they have to breathe in a lot of this stuff. Cave-ins could happen. Imagine what this is doing to their health. Both physical and mental health at the same time too. This is destroying them. So people grow up in this type of environment. It is not. It's very easy to see why somebody like Enzo would fall in with the mafia.
And they're essentially seen.
This also makes them really hate the rich people who control these mines. It makes them really despise them.
As disposable.
Enzo turns to crime as a means to make something of himself. The odds are stacked against him. So what does he do? He sees an opportunity for himself to gain some status, to gain some respect.
Do you wish to commit to this family?
Okay, so about this right here,
Gain some status, to gain some respect.
so what this is here, this is basically his made man ceremony. So Italian mafia families have very similar ceremonies where basically how it is that they take like a prayer card and there's a saint on the card. Sometimes it's Saint Mary, sometimes it's a different saint. And what they do is they burn the card and they stab the person a little bit, like pinch them, and then they drip a little bit of the blood on the card, and the card basically burns in their hands. It's very similar to Mafia 2, how they did it in Mafia 2, and they basically swear an oath of allegiance to the family. But in reality is most people do not care about this oath of allegiance. They're opportunists. They're only in for the mafia just to make the money. So for them this really means nothing. But that was basically like a thing that, if I betray this, I'm going to hell for my actions for betraying the family. And it's kind of a weird ironic system because they think that they're going to go to hell for betraying their family, but they don't think they're going to go to hell for doing all the horrible evil things they do for their family.
Do you wish to commit to this family?
I do.
Swearing the oath is the chance for him to finally be accepted. He's found a family. It's the thing he's been searching for his entire life, but it comes at a cost.
I think players are in for an emotional roller coaster. The high stakes of the Mafia life present opportunities for us as storytellers to take players and put players through the ringer, really, in terms of what happens to the character, what happens to them in the game.
You again.
What makes a really compelling gameplay experience is the mix of the high-intensity combat, cover play, cover shooting, set by these beautiful cinematics that make what you do in the combat so much more meaningful because you're fighting for something you really believe in.
Authenticity and immersion are key. And so we wanted to take that philosophy from the storytelling and make sure that it was consistent in the gameplay.
Whether you come for that core cover combat shooting experience or that white knuckle driving experience, we have that in Mafia The Old Country, but it's unique.
There's some downbeats, there's some deep storytelling moments, and then there's some like high intensity action. And I think that's what makes Mafia missions and the general experience so interesting, is that we're constantly trying to change that roller coaster experience that you're on.
Enzo's proving himself with guns, and
Okay, this gun right here, that's on Enzo's back, this is not a Carcano. He's holding a Bodeo 1889, but this gun right here, this gun I believe is a Spencer Carbine. I will have a picture of it up on the screen. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
we wanted
I think it is a Spencer Carbine.
the combat to feel like there was a scarcity of resources, so you have to be more tactical in the way that you approach combat. The knife has
The Spencer Carbine, by the way, is a lever action.
been an integral part of gameplay. It's a part of Sicilian culture.
We wanted our gameplay to be immersive, to have a life or death kind of vibe. So when players are in a knife duel, when they're in a gunfight, they're genuinely fearing for their lives.
My flesh must burn like this saint if I do not keep my oath.
And notice one thing here. You see that the burnt saint, how it's flying away the parts of the prayer card. So that's after the made man ceremony. So that's kind of like the little background detail they have that there.
Bringing 1900 Sicily to life for us, it infuses every aspect of the development. It's about the characters, it's about the music, it's about the story, it's about the setting, it's about the vistas, it's about the vehicles, it's everything. It always starts with research, it always starts with immersing ourselves in the subject matter. So whether that's reading every crime book around the Sicilian Mafia, watching all of the movies, even driving the cars, firing the weapons, and then translating that into the game, that's the development experience.
We even sent some folks out to Sicily. We were then able to take all of those experiences and try to translate it into an on-screen experience, but also a story. And those two things are woven together in a way that I think players are going to really enjoy.
So I will say, wait.
Bravery is not common in this world, and so
That was exactly what I was going to say on there, is that the accents. I appreciate the amount of research that the studio did into Sicily, but also the accents. These sound generally like Italian Sicilian accents to me. I can't tell it's Italian and a Sicilian accent apart, so I'm just a bit confused on that, but they do sound to me genuine, accents like I would hear from that time period and from that region. But let me know, guys, down below, are the characters speaking in Sicilian accents or Italian accents? Let me know if anybody knows a little bit more about that. But I do really appreciate that the characters actually speak in accents to their native land. That I imagine how cringe it would have been if the characters would have been speaking in an American accent. Oh my god, that would have been really bad. A lot of games do that. They set their world in foreign countries, and then they have them speak in American accents. It's really bad. But I'm actually happy they speak their native accents to their native land.
The Mafia that we see in Mafia The Old Country is much different than the Mafia that we see in some of the other Mafia games. It's a time-honored tradition steeped in secrecy, and there's this sort of deep honor that we see within the Teresi family and within the characters there.
The characters' relationships with each other, the way they behave, is very much influenced by that setting and that cultural difference.
This is a distinctive experience that I've never played before, and I'm sure that players are going to feel the same.
Mafia The Old Country is our first Unreal 5 game in the studio, and it's particularly suited to this.
The world looks beautiful, but just look at this right here. This shows you what Sicily was like. And this right here, you see like guards. Guard here, probably guard up here too. Guard on the road. So whoever's living here is very wealthy and also has, guards to protect his, his mansion. But this basically shows you what it was like in Sicily. Is you had really, really poor and then really, really rich.
Sicilian setting.
We've really been able to push the boat out in terms of sort of the real tiny details on everything.
One of the big ones for me is metahuman. You have characters that have really lifelike expressions, micro details. Many times when I'm watching the game, especially on a big screen in 4K, I start to forget that they're characters rendered in an engine. They just look like real characters in a movie. I think that's the level of immersion that we want, and it allows people, I think, to really suspend their disbelief and go along for the ride.
Enzo is beautifully rendered in the game, and I think he's one of the most compelling game characters we've seen for a long time.
The thing I'm most excited about from Mafia The Old Country is finally getting the game in players' hands.
The story pulls you through really quickly, and at the end, it takes your breath away, and it's one that you're not going to want to spoil for your friends.
The visuals and the storytelling are absolutely next level.
Our setting's completely distinctive. Our story's completely unique. This is a game that you haven't played before. The best crime stories have unforgettable twists, and this game's no exception. Players are in for a treat.
Welcome, Enzo.
Wonder what the twist is going to be in this game. I did notice one last thing here before he wait.
Characters in a movie. I think the story.
So this is what I wanted to show here. This is a chapter probably early in the game when Enzo was like a worker in the mines. But like, imagine what these guys had to go through. Like these really poor people that had to work in these mines, and then they basically just working for these really rich people. They barely had anything. They would really absolutely despise the rich elite. So it's no surprise that somebody like Enzo would fall in with the mafia because they're trying to make money. They're trying to build a better life for themselves. But at the same time is they're being led into a life of crime, so they're having their life destroyed too. Yeah, but I guess that's basically it there, guys. I hope you guys liked my explanation. I hope you guys didn't get bored of me talking a little bit about the history of Italy. I do like reading history, and Italy is one country. I know a little bit about their history. But thank you guys for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. Any of my Italian viewers in the comments, let me know how accurate I was in my history explanation of Italy. But thank you guys for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a like, and I will see you guys on the next one. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day, guys.